what motivates often founders at Caltech actually is wanting to be sure that something they started, their love child, actually gets out into the world.
I'm David Fleck, and I'm the founder and one of the managing partners at Freeflow, and we really focus in on, what's commonly called deep tech, so human health and planetary health oriented companies that are generally enabled by compute. Founded the firm about 6 years ago, and saw this. What we have identified as almost an endemic issue, which is that there is just an inordinate amount of science that is world-class science that's being done at scientific institutes. We initially saw it at Caltech, and then also identified it now at Berkeley. That there are amazing excuse me, scientific founders at these places that want to translate their science, but in some ways they're underserved by venture capital. There's not VCs that are specifically focused on walking that path and almost demystifying the founder experience for some of these scientists and just helping them along. And that was the genesis for founding the firm Freeflow. And then we really serve those founders with what we describe as the non-science value add, which is things such as fundraising, go to market, what's the product roadmap, what's the clinical path if it's something that's therapeutic or a medical device. And so Barbara and Dave have just been amazing advisors to us as we've built this out. And Barbara comes from Caltech. Dave is from Berkeley. In terms of, a little bit of, I'll have each of them introduce themselves here, momentarily. But Barbara is just a well-known uh, uh, person whose career I've actually known Barbara, I think now for going on 17 years, I believe, or something. But she's the former director of the Beckman Institute at Caltech, was the Merkin Institute director as well at Caltech. She's a leader in decoding gene regulatory logic, cell identity, and functional genomics. Her work has driven the development of various computational and high throughput genomic tools. And her research over her career has spanned various disease genomics like Alzheimer's, cancer, and systems biology. Dave, just to say a few words about him, he's the director of QB3, also of Baker Labs and the Baker Fellows program, which are basically translational efforts at Berkeley that I'll let him maybe detail in more with more breadth. He's also leader in engineered gene therapy, stem cells, and directed evolution of viral vectors. He's had over 250 publications and 50 patents, and he's co-founded a handful of companies as well, including a free flow company by the name of VivaRay. So with that, let me pass it over to Barbara and Dave to say a few words about themselves, and then I'll also just tell the audience that we will be monitoring the chat. You can feel free to put questions in there along the way, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. We'll probably start to weave those in, a little bit later during this hour. So with that, let me pass it over to either Dave or Barbara to introduce themselves further, and then we can get into some of the questions.
Barbara, please. Would you like to go first?
No.
Oh, I think you might be on mute.
No, you go first.
Okay. As David mentioned, Dave Schaffer, I've been faculty at UC Berkeley now for 26 years in the departments of chemical and biomolecular engineering, bioengineering, and molecular and cell biology. Also, as David mentioned, my research focuses on gene and cell therapy and specifically developing technology platforms to reduce barriers to clinical success of those technologies. And about 12, 13 years ago or so, I started wanting to get our technologies into human clinical development, which to us meant that we needed to get them into startup companies. So I started with one company and then caught the bug and have really, really enjoyed building companies as essentially conduits to get our technology into clinical trials. So I've co-founded 7 companies to date, which have either gone public, been acquired, or are private and growing. And about 4 years ago or so, I had the pleasure, the joy of stepping into a role to try to help others do the same. And am now director of 2 organizations that are joined at the hip, Baker Labs and QB3, which it's Baker Labs is a growing network of startup company incubators within the University of California. So we currently have the largest biotech incubator owned by a university in the country, and we're putting up 3 additional buildings at Berkeley and UCSF to really grow that enterprise and that community and help technology translate from academia to industry.
So Dave is a founder with lots of experience. I'm a different kind of fish. I'm a founder voyeur. So for a long time, starting way back at the very earliest genome involved and sequencing companies, I was on the SAB of Myriad, which brought forward the BRCA test. So I've been looking at this from close and far range for a long while, much more intensively in the years in which I was the launch director for the Merkin Institute at Caltech. And especially for the techers in the audience and founders, I urge you to go to their website. Viviana Grodnow is now at the helm of it and is doing a terrific job of hypercharging it. So there are things we'll probably talk about in the course of this that Merkin does and that are done differently by the entities that Dave was talking about at Berkeley. And if you're going to be a founder, if you're a student with a hot project, if you're just kind of thinking about it, these are sort of great anchor places to start.
Thank you. Let me maybe dive into Dave just on a follow-up question and one for Barbara. So Dave, you founded multiple biotech companies and now run QB3 and Baker Labs, which basically helps dozens of teams go from lab to startup. And I'm just curious, if you can go back, what was the first time that you thought this has to become a company, not just a paper? What tipped you over that edge? Is there a moment, or there's probably several of them, but is there something that kind of like stands out in your mind?
Probably very early, all the way back to, not necessarily the specific work that I was doing at the time, but the concepts, all the way back to grad school. My father is a very basic biology professor, a biochemist, and he's retired now. And my mother ran she was an MD who ran human clinical trials for Novartis and Sanofi in osteoporosis and bone cancer. And so very different points of the spectrum. And somehow I landed in a very perhaps unoriginal way, exactly halfway between them, in that I'm a faculty member who likes getting technologies into the clinic, but stayed, in academia rather than joining industry. So from very early on, I knew we wanted to I was solving problems that I wanted to have an impact on human health. So that was from the outset. The technology I worked on in grad school probably taught me how to tackle problems and how to think about them well. That was not, ripe for translation. So with my postdoc, I began to pick up some technologies that I thought really could, potentially be impactful in the clinic, and then built my lab around those kinds of problems. And then we had technologies that were ripe for the first time around 2008. As we remember, that wasn't the best time to start a new company. The world economic meltdown. And the market started to recover 2012, 2013. You'll remember that's the beginning of the biotech run that lasted from around 2012 to 2021. And what that meant for us is that, capital was coming back into the field, and we had technology that was working. We had publications, we had patents, probably even more than what we would have needed to have started a company. We're ready in 2008, so we're very much ready in 2012. So the stars began to align, that the field was ready for gene therapies. They were ready to invest in it, and we had I think a very differentiated technology at the time. So it was still an open question as to whether we would license to a larger company to translate or try to do it ourselves with startups. But big pharma at that point didn't really know much about gene therapy. So it was pretty clear that we needed to do our own startup. So that was when I started that journey back in 2013.
Yeah. Yeah. And just one follow-up question would be, how do you help or know when there's students or colleagues, like how do you help them decide when it's time to take that leap?
Hmm. Yeah, it is really a matter of the stars aligning, that there has to be a differentiated technology that has an advantage relative to others within the field. The field has to be ready for it. You don't want to be arguing to be the very first CAR T company. It's tough
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get investors to be comfortable with risk if you're the very, very first and you're way out ahead. So it needs to be something where the field has some comfort with the technology beginning to work. Perhaps there have been some academic clinical trials that have been working that provide that assurance that this is an investable field. And
Mm.
one has to have the right team, a terrific group of people. So those are the three T's we all refer to, right? Technology, team, and total addressable market, TAM. That
Yeah.
there's a recognizable market for technology then.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe something that I would add from the observations at Caltech, true at Berkeley, but maybe more often true at Caltech. It starts so far down in the basic research, and given the entire landscape for doing research and for making it relevant when it can translate, what motivates often founders at Caltech actually is wanting to be sure that something they started, their love child, actually gets out into the world. And sometimes the way to be more sure of that is not to sell your IP, but is to nominally do it yourself. But the second thing is that most founders, either out of our place that haven't done it before, learn that although they're incredibly capable people and can do an infinite amount of stuff in any given year, in any given 24-hour period, actually founding a company and growing one up is a really different enterprise than founding a lab and growing it up or driving forward a research program. And so the necessity to educate yourself early and to find partners. And one way to find them is through Freeflow or through Merkin or through all these other enterprises, and start doing it early. Just because you're looking and thinking about, could this be a company, doesn't mean you have to do it. You're not wasting your time. Sometime in your life, it'll probably be relevant, but you keep constantly educating, and that helps in deciding when to go and making contacts and discussing with more than one person or group of persons when is the time to go and in what form to go. Too much money at the beginning can be a curse, as well as no money at the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
You don't want to be honing your elevator pitch for the first time when you're talking to your best possible funder.
yeah. Well, and the thing that I've observed is, because things from Caltech and Berkeley are basically have their roots in basic research, is that it's very interesting because it provides optionality for the founders early on in terms of where they may want to apply that research. It gives them a few different options, maybe in terms of maybe diseases or platforms that they may be able to do in terms of application. And the thing that I usually end up telling people when they say, where should I go first, is with our academic founders, go where the passion is, because that's the thing that just drives that relentless work ethic that is required, to be a founder of a company. And so usually the TAM, we always have to monitor the TAM and the team as well. But just if you that as Dave mentioned, the three T's: the team, the TAM, the technology. But if you're applying it in a way that is something that just gets you up in the morning, if the other two T's are satisfied, that's just the thing that gets people through the kind of the hard times, I find. Because usually with the with academics, it's not about optimizing for how much money I'm going to make from this startup. It's that, oh my gosh, I want to get this out into the world and impact things and not just have it be a paper or something that is built on by other academics.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
David, maybe, another question, both for Dave Schaffer and for Barbara, on this general topic is, for, tenured, faculty members, whether it's at Berkeley or Caltech or, individuals who are on that track, they're subject to certain, limitations if they want to retain that tenured position. Yet they're often, at the heart of a startup, and it's their lab, it's their work or the work of their, postdocs and graduate students that actually generate the technology that has this translational potential. So what have you seen work? What hasn't worked? What are your thoughts, observations about, how the founders, the academic faculty member founders should be, thinking about this and approaching it? And then maybe, from an investor perspective, just in terms of what's worked and hasn't worked, because it's a challenge and something that we at Freeflow, we deal with this on a regular basis now, almost 40 times, and that will continue to be the case. And there's no, there's no gold standard and there's no rule book for this. We're writing a playbook, but your thoughts on this, I think, would be interesting.
Yeah, I've seen people get involved in a variety of capacities, as you well know, everywhere from, being a consultant. Well, some people just want to hand it off to another team and let them run with it. I've not been interested in that. I've always wanted to be involved. So anything from, consulting, board member, all the way through somebody who takes a leave of absence from the university and takes more of a management, operational role inside the company. And Berkeley allows all of those. The UC policy, which I'm pretty sure is very similar to other universities, is you can devote up to 20% of your time in outside compensated activity, provide that you report it to the university and it's transparent and above board. So that's depending on how you define 20%, like how long is your work week? Is it a 40-hour work week or a 100-hour work week? But I kind of interpreted that pretty liberally and spent a lot of time especially with the early companies, probably 20, 25 hours with my second company a week for years. So I was, effectively CSO within the company for a number of years. I've never taken a leave of absence, but people do that. At some point along the way, the university says, "Oh, when are you going to come back?" Fish or cut bait. They have to either get back a committed faculty member after 2-ish years or so, or the person ends up joining the company longer term. But regardless, it's as we all know, it's critical that faculty surround themselves with experience, especially when doing this for the first time or new. Because when it comes down to it, companies are more complex than academic labs. My academic lab, I have roughly 3 levels of people. I have undergrads. They spend most of their time with the grad students, the postdoc, rather than me. And then I have grad students and postdocs, so I pretty much treat the same after maybe 2 years or so when the graduate students have gotten more advanced. And then I have some staff members. And everything else gets, of course, subcontracted to the rest of the university, right? All the purchasing, all the lab safety, all that stuff is subbed. All that needs to be internal within the company. And of course, there are different verticals. There's the R&D branch of the company. If the company's heading into the clinic, if it's therapeutics, they need to do process development and CMC. There's the clinical side of things. Then there's the whole fundraising effort, both the CFO and the CBO functionalities. And it's in each one of those, there's, of course, not just 3 levels of hierarchy. They're junior RAs all the way through scientist 1, scientist 2, senior vice president, all the way through CSO. So there's a lot more complexity and a lot more moving parts to be able to get it functioning really well. So it's critical, I think, to bring on board. There's this saying from Warren Buffett that I was trying to surround myself with people who are better than I am in certain areas, and I find that I naturally drift in their direction. And it's really important to bring on knowledge and experience in each area where the faculty member is non-expert. If you do it enough times, you get, much more instinct as to how it should look. But you still, I'm not an MD. I'm never going to try to pretend to be a CMO. We need to bring on board the terrific expertise to make the team whole.
Finding a great CEO partner early is really a huge deal. And when it's a little operation, you need advice from people who can point to people who actually are willing to be maybe at first a part-time partner in a very early start, and then go full time, and who that person is, and whether that's a fit for the mission and the experience, and for whoever the founder is and how they interact. It isn't quite marriage, but it's close, and there are all the hazards if you get it wrong. So I mean, and I think that's the huge thing, and recognizing all the things that Dave just said, that sometimes it's naively just going in and thinking the big thing is to get the money and the people will follow. Somebody will hire them and it'll all work out. And has to be a lot more intentional than that.
Yeah, I totally agree with Barbara. I think culture comes from the top, so the CEO is critically important. It's across the C-suite, there has to be a lot of areas of expertise covered, and you can slice that pie in a variety of different ways. As we know, sometimes the CTO in a company is more operational. In other cases, that's the manufacturing person. The CEO can be a bit more business-like, more basic science-like, more MBA-ish, as long as the rest of the C-suite has the rest of the expertise. But it's so important to have, with each one of my companies, I've made a mistake. And I will forgive myself for making the mistake once, but don't want to make it, multiple times. And I made a mistake on a CEO twice in different ways. One was to hire somebody who wasn't experienced enough. It was a first time and terrific, person, but it took a while, for them to be able to gather the momentum and build up steam. And another time, it was somebody who was very experienced and savvy, but turned out to be, effectively a closet narcissist, somebody who thought they were the only one who knew the answers to all the questions and did not want to surround themselves with people who were better than they were, because they were always the smartest person in the room. And those two outcomes were had different, consequences, but both were non-optimal for the company. And it's really important to get to know a CEO months and months and months before offering him that position, so that it ends up being the right person. And as David and Kevin know, I'm effectively now old enough that some of my former graduate students and postdocs are experienced enough to bring in as CEOs, which is what we did with the company David mentioned at the beginning, Vivere. I had a grad student who finished up in 2013. We've started two companies together. One we took public, another one was sold to Merck, and then she was ready to be CEO. And I've known her for 17 years now. So there's trust and really strong working relationship there. So I can't always do that, but that's the ideal kind of relationship with the CEO, somebody you've known for a very long time and trust and respect.
Yeah.
I think also getting the aspiration, expectations, and space right. You're often working with a postdoc or a student who's been important on the project and is reasonably going to be a co-founder, but that's a different thing than becoming the CEO. And, there's a lot of cultural awareness of the really extraordinary models, the Bill Gateses, that start from scratch and they go all the way up. That is not the routine model. That's not the thing to try and think you're going to do if you want to optimize success of the project. It's to think how to fit into the company and play an important role, but not to try to be something where you have absolutely no experience. The experienced former student, that's ideal.
Yeah, Bill Gates is a great example. His father was a very talented corporate attorney with business sense. So he effectively had free consulting there. He surrounded himself with people who were better than he was in a certain area, learned a lot. He made a few mistakes at the beginning, but obviously picked up that business sense.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. Fleck, we'll hand it back over to you in a second. But before we do, I just want to go on the record on behalf of Freeflow, the firm, to say that we do not advocate that faculty members take leaves of absence or sabbaticals or otherwise depart from their roles. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that, and the participants hear this, that as a matter of practice and policy, we don't do that. It does happen, but it's not part of our practice to encourage that. That wouldn't really facilitate a strong long-term relationship with either Caltech, Berkeley, or any of the other institutes that we work with.
So, Kevin, if I can just jump in and say the other side of that I've observed more widely, which is you don't do that. And it's good to know when you're looking at possible funders whether they're going to turn up the pressure and try to get someone who actually doesn't want to leave their academic post to do it. And that does happen. That's not just theoretical.
Yeah. Well, and this is actually a point I want to make, which is that, and you can probably tell by the name of our venture firm, which is Freeflow, which is that we try not to be dogmatic, and so we like to. And on this specific point, the thing that we do is we actually take the scientific founder or founders, and that's the foundation that we build on. But we say, what is the best role for this individual or these individuals? Have that conversation, and then you build on top of that, right? And so most often it's going to be, as you mentioned, something where they're still very actively involved early on, but they're most likely going to stay in their academic post, because there's all sorts of actually benefits. Actually, number one, there's all sorts of benefits actually that usually accrue to the company by having them continue to remain in that position. Number two, it's usually the best way to structure the company anyway, in terms of finding that professional team that then can run hard at that problem. And then one thing I'll say is that observationally, I think oftentimes scientific founders undervalue or underestimate the fact that they're usually already entrepreneurs because they've established their academic labs. And I think that actually does a fair amount of training on how to be an entrepreneur by starting that and getting the funding for it, hiring, articulating the vision to people that are going to support it. And so that's just contextually, it's not obviously there's not a cap table, or there is, it's a different type of cap table, I guess. But that's just something that I've seen, is that there's just skills that come from that actually are very translatable in a different, definition of translation, but to then creating companies as well. If you had to say, I'm just curious, if you guys had to say, like, if there's someone in your lab, a grad student, a postdoc, or even a colleague, and said, I think this might be a company, but I don't know what to do next, just kind of an open-ended question. Are there a few things that you would recommend them doing? Whether that be, I don't want to lead you, actually. Yeah. I'm just curious, like, what would you say to them if they had that question for you? You probably have had people do that to each of you.
Yeah, Barbara, would you like to go first?
You go first.
Absolutely. I mean, so a little bit about Baker Labs. We have a pipeline of programs that run all the way from funding late stage academic research to companies that, one of our latest buildings is going to be a building for companies that graduate from the incubator ecosystem and need more space. So we're going to be covering everything from a late stage academic research program through a Series B company within the ecosystem. And one of the things we've been really concentrating on, especially, is that we fund around 12 projects per year within academia between Berkeley and UCSF. 300K, $100K a year for 3 years for each one of those projects. So, we're talking $3.5 million of funding each year, entirely focused on funding new ideas and technologies to get them into a position where they can start a company after those 3 years. So we are continuously in this program, which is becoming more and more high contact, speaking with people about, is your idea ready to spin out into a new company? So we've built our staff to be able to answer questions like that and talk to graduate students, talk to postdocs, talk to faculty, introduce them to investors, to KOLs, to clinicians, to pharma, biotech people who know something about a problem. And the whole goal is to connect people with knowledge to inform that question about whether it's ready. So all of us are open to having, we always have an open door on call if our faculty reach out to us and say, hey, I have a question about this. I had 2 calls like that last week to help advise them about, is the idea ripe, or do they need to further develop it? And as you well know, David and Kevin, we're very grateful to the both of you. You're part of this community, and we make lots of introductions of our faculty to you. to get your input on that question, whether the technology is ready or still needs further advancing. But the hope is that with that knowledge and mentorship, which really didn't exist on the Berkeley campus 10 years ago, people will be making well-informed decisions that when they decide to hit play, to start fundraising for a company, it's a hopefully at that point very fully baked story that's ready to go.
So on the Caltech scene, there are several places and things to go look at. The Office of Technology Transfer and the newer Innovation Center. So incubator is being built as we speak, but there is already an active incubator on campus. So those are places to go. I've already mentioned the Merkin Institute, which is a great place to go and make contact and get kind of steered around to different possible places to help. So whether you're at an early stage and are eligible for fellowships that go in this direction, whether you're interested in the Merkin support for early stage research to get it to the point where it can go out on its own and start as a company, there are new bridge fellowships that actually help people to do that when they're finishing a project at Caltech and trying to bridge out into a startup. So there are all kinds of things that are now available for people either at the student level or at the faculty founder level. And I urge contact early in order to take advantage of what they offer.
Yeah, actually,
which changes with time. There's always something new.
Yeah. Well, actually, I had a question, but then let me just remind everyone as well that's watching this, feel free to put questions in the chat. Just want to remind everyone of that. Barbara and Dave, could each of you just maybe list a few things? Because I think one of the things that obviously impacted our decision as a firm to focus on Caltech first, then to expand into Berkeley, is that they are, number one, top 5 research institutes in the world, top 10, however you want to look at it, but just a top research institutes. But also that the institutes kind of get it and they want to support this, the translation, getting the research out into companies, impacting the world. Could each of you maybe articulate a little bit of how the institutes have supported this? It won't be the laundry list, of course, but just like some of those things that maybe people don't even know exist that are out there, because those are sometimes the most important first seeds to allow these to kind of grow.
Sure. I mean, Berkeley has evolved a lot over the past 25 years. And kind of the way I think about it is that when I first got here, there was neither a will nor a way to help faculty start companies. And then somewhere in between, there developed a will, but there was still not a way. The university didn't know how to do it, couldn't help faculty. And now I think we have a lot of institutions in place on the campus where there is a will and a way that the campus can actively support and encourage people to do it. And along with that was a major cultural shift as well that, 25 years ago, the idea, patent was a 4-letter word back then. If you were patenting your research, you were selling out to corporate interests, you're trying to make money off of basic research, and that was anathema at the time. And now the university is actively encouraging it for a number of reasons. I think part of it is that they view this as, I view it as an extension of the university's, increasing the impact of the university's research on society by enabling it to get into companies that can turn it into solutions to societal problems. It's also, I think, very consistent with the educational mission of the university that, we run internship programs that place undergrads in startup companies within our incubator, and they're learning about how to do biotech R&D, and they're getting job offers. So it's helping the university's educational mission. And then in addition, if the university can financially benefit from this, especially at a time where there's been both at public and private universities, a public de-investment in higher education, we need to develop, new models and alternative income streams. What's happening with the NIH is just the most recent, development of that. But, states have been de-investing from public universities for many years, in California as well as elsewhere. So we need to develop alternative income streams, and being able to financially benefit from the product of our ingenuity and our research is something the university will have to, I think, increasingly do to be able to stay strong and healthy. So there's a definite interest from Berkeley to the point now where there's the statistics that we love quoting. For 3 years in a row now, we've been the leading university for venture-backed startups founded by alumni. We're ahead of Stanford by quite a good distance now. So it's the university's really turned from something that was very basic ivory tower-ish to something that's really turned into a terrific fountain for innovation and entrepreneurship, and has built, I think, along with things like QB3 and Baker Labs and Skydeck, the campus has also changed policies to make it easier. The UCs will now, in the academic personnel manual for the entire UC system, entrepreneurial activity can be considered as for tenure and promotion cases. So that all of a sudden you get credit for what you do beyond publishing the paper. Of course, we still have to publish, but you get credit for being involved in the next steps of that technology as well. Licensing, at least at some universities, has gotten better. Berkeley, we still have room for improvement, but it's way better than it was 10 years ago. Everything used to be centralized at UC Office of the President, so you'd redline your licensing agreement. It would go through Berkeley, end up in some anonymous office somewhere in Oakland, and you wouldn't hear back for a month, and then you'd iterate back and forth. Now all those decisions are local on the campus, so the campus is streamlined and accelerated. That still needs to get better, but is a lot better than what it used to be. And of course, the campus shares the licensing revenue across the university with the university, the unit, the dean of the faculty member that created the invention, and then with the inventors as well. And so that process is very efficient and streamlined, and incentivizes graduate students and postdocs and faculty as well. So I think the campus has gotten way better organized and has a lot more, I think, centers and institutes on the campus to accelerate this process, but has also matched that with changes in policy to make it easier.
So for Caltech, we're actually, I could pretty much just say ditto. The culture change we've seen, roughly the timeline that Dave describes for Berkeley, which I didn't actually know until he just did it, is really pretty similar to Caltech, seeing the need and the want to do translation as opposed to being outside of it, except for, doing some intellectual property protection. That has changed into a much more active, promoted translational thing. The most obvious manifestation of that is the Merkin Institute, but also staffing up at the Office of Technology Transfer. And I think we'll see more of that for the same reasons Dave said. I mean, the sort of public defunding of much of science, and the fact that many things that can be taken out, certainly out of bioscience, into the private sector now include really exciting research. I mean, I know in the areas of cancer in particular, and also in platforms, it's for labs that participate in those things and do those things and do it at a world-class level to see and become aware that there are groups that are really tuned and humming and do it faster and better than an academic lab on the particular focal point that they're operating on is an education, and realizing that the life out there and the way that you benefit from it, if you're a founder who has sight of both, is as much scientific as it is funding for making the science go forward. I mean, I've always enjoyed thinking about translation as something that has evolved from the famous bench to bedside single path arrow into what was always wanted but often didn't happen, which is really that kind of cycle that goes out into the private sector and the bedside and then comes back much more efficiently into the academic sector. And I think that kind of cross-pollination is great for science and great for the people doing it. So, and the entities that do it, we're so small compared to Berkeley, and we've never been not local. So it's all very local. It's not more than a block away from wherever you are to get to the persons that you need, maybe 2 blocks to talk to. So that's still true. I think what's happened with the creation of the Merkin and now the incubator and other things is that this is just a bigger presence on the campus. And as you say, culturally, people are coming in, including students and postdocs, that already have their sights set in the direction of either founding a company or working in companies of various sizes. And that's been a big change, and a positive one largely.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to get into a little bit is just that step where, I think we've touched on the scientist founders, then the university support, and then there reaches this point where they start to say, okay, like, maybe I want to raise some money for this. So I wanted to actually touch on, before raising venture money, are there some important scientific or translational milestones that you think a team should hit? Are there green lights where you say, okay, the new outside capital is going to help rather than hurt? Because I think that's something that we see as we don't rush people to take it. We develop longitudinal relationships because we want it to be the right time. It's not pushing someone to do it now. It's waiting for the right time to then do it. So I'm just curious if you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. I mean, I've started companies at 2 junctures. One is a technology platform that's, ripe to be able to create a first product, and with some proof of concept that it can create that first product. And that's, there should be if it's a technology platform that can solve a broad number of problems for a therapeutic modality, like a delivery technology, for example, where you can deliver many different cargoes to different targets. That's, very, I think, versatile and powerful for starting a company, but there should be proof of concept that it can work for one initial target, to the point where it's going to be promising when you get it into a company, start turning the crank on creating the first developmental candidate. And then the other time I've started is when there's a DC, when there is already defined developmental candidate that's ready to race towards IND. And I think the profiles of those look different, the boxes that have to be checked. For the DC, there should be strong efficacy data within 1 or more animal models and strong signs of safety. That's what would be needed to be able to get the funding to head towards IND. And if it's more a platform, earlier stage company, that's of course more of a seed round. But there should be strong, I think, proof of principle that the technology will work on the first proposed DC that would come out of it.
And I guess one of the things that I've observed, just to everything that Dave said applies, but also depending on what it is, thinking about whether, I mean, everybody can think forward and realize if it's something that needs regulatory approval, that you kind of have to look at that path early on and know how long that path is and what the steps are on it, and who's going to do different parts of it. The issue, particularly thinking about drugs and things, is that manufacture can be a much bigger hurdle than what use the basic science, who's able to make something at the bench and put it through its various animal tests and it all works and it's fine. The issue of actually getting control of manufacture and manufacture at scale, the CMC things, if you haven't been down this road before, you need to talk to people who have, and to understand that that's not just something to put off and somebody will solve it.
Oh, I could not possibly agree more. I totally appreciate that comment. Yeah, so I'm a chemical engineer, and chemical engineers are often the people who end up doing process development and CMC within biotech. And the field, of course, goes back and forth. That small molecules and antibodies, large molecules, were the staple of the pharmaceutical and biotech industry for many years. From 2012 to 2021, we had a decade where the field was willing to take risk on more complex therapeutic modalities, like siRNAs, ASOs, gene therapies, viral vectors, lipid nanoparticle vectors, and then cell therapies for both, cancer immunotherapy and to an extent stem cells. And those things are, with the exception of ASOs and siRNAs, are not amenable to organic chemistry synthesis, right? So those are bioprocesses that create the majority of those. Even mRNA is an enzymatic process, and it gets complicated, very, very complicated, very fast. So there have been companies we could probably all list that had terrific technology but failed because they couldn't manufacture it at scale. And so it's very important to think very early. And then the other thing that happens, of course, that we've seen this many times, that at the beginning, there's so much technical risk associated with whether or not the product would work in the clinic that manufacturing is neglected. The goal is just get it into the clinic as quickly as possible to see, if you can get an efficacy signal out of the phase 1 trial. So the process is put together with, kind of bubble gum and duct tape. It's a very, very provisional process. And then all of a sudden it's in the clinic and they're locked into that process by the FDA because that's what was, that was what was approved in the IND. And then it takes enormous effort and time and money to change it at that point. So it effectively gets locked into place as a substandard manufacturing process. And sometimes it can get them to the pivotal trial. Sometimes it can't even get it that far. But there's going to be difficulty at commercialization if the process was really not invested in prior to getting into the clinic. And of course, the flip side is you don't want to invest and overinvest in a terrific process that's perfected if you don't know the product is going to work. So there's a balance there for investing enough to be able to create a decent manufacturing technology that will do justice to the product without spending too much time on the CMC prior to getting some clinical results. But tough problem.
Yeah, I think of that as like going from proof or even POC, proof of concept, to an actual product. Because I think the tension is that in academia, a lot of times, the goal is to try to prove something new, whereas in startups, it's really to make something work reliably and scalably, and cost efficiently. So I think that's a little bit of a mindset shift for founders who are scientists. Do you have any advice for people as they navigate that? Because it's a natural tension.
Yeah, that was the biggest. I mean, there are a few mindset shifts. I think that was the biggest one that I had to learn, because if we're trying to publish, right, you send your cover letter to Nature and say, this is an amazing innovation. It's never, ever been done before. This is the first time. It's really novel. That flies with Nature. It doesn't fly with investors, right? The first time it's never been done before, equals risk. And so you want to be at the front of the wave for a new technology. There has to be signs that it's working. Ideally, some academic clinical trials are showing that this field is working, it's promising, and that really needs to be in place before something launches. So you don't want to say this is the first time something has been done, this is completely novel. You want to say that this is picking up steam. There's a lot of opportunity. Look at all these signs. There have been some investments that have happened, maybe some BD deals, some clinical trials, and we're catching the front of that wave. You should invest in us because we're not alone, but we're innovative.
Yeah.
David, maybe I could lob in another question, and then it looks like we might have some inbound questions. I don't think we can have a panel like this without talking for at least a minute about AI and large language models and other emerging tools. So with that, I don't think we really need to set up the question, and just, in the interest of time, what are the two of you seeing in terms of, the utility and utilization of AI to move more to in silico phase work before, going to the wet lab and the bench and other, applications that are emerging in your worlds?
Yeah, Barbara, do you have some? I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear you.
I mean, obviously we see it in the science, and then it transmits into the companies. The pressure to do it in the companies may almost be too much. It may be that not you guys, but some investors just want to hear AI all the time, everywhere. And it's the intelligent and appropriate use of various different kinds, not just the large language models of AI ML, that clearly you want people who are competent and are not dinosaurs. You don't want to be wasting time doing programming in an antediluvian way where routine things can be done very rapidly by one person that used to take a team in 6 months. All of those things apply, I think, in lots of companies, and I think it's pretty much happening. I think the kind of oversell, AI will solve it all, is an enormous hazard. It's a hazard for startups. It's just an enormous hazard. And so I think, you have to ask yourself, do I really know what I'm even saying when I'm saying AI? Do you know where it applies? And, if you're just doing the right thing that people trained at Caltech and Berkeley would do, I think things will be great. And you have to call it out so that people who are kind of looking for it recognize it. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just the way it's coming into research. You just naturally have it coming into your companies. In some sense, it's simple.
Yeah, I do fully agree. I mean, it's certainly we use it a lot. I collaborate with a machine learning AI really terrific person on the Berkeley campus, and use it, of course, continuously for search. So it's an indispensable tool. But I also fully agree that it has become a little bit hyped. I view it more as a tool that should be pulled out of the toolbox at the appropriate time. Sometimes you need a confocal microscope, sometimes you need a cell sorter, sometimes you need AI. I don't think it should be the identity of the company. I think it should be an enabler of the company. And then in addition, of course, AI is trained on data. So high quality experimental data is still going to be, I think, a rate limitation towards quality AI. So we still do need experimentalists. But I look forward to seeing how it's going to further streamline and accelerate research. But I don't see it being a replacement, of course, for a laboratory. I see it being as a terrific supplement for experimental research.
Yeah. Wanted to pose a question that's come in, which is around the CEO. So you guys have both highlighted the importance of finding the right CEO, someone who has both CEO experience and is also an excellent fit with the academic founders. So how does this relate to encouraging undergrads, grad students, and postdocs to take roles like the CEO or other leadership roles to launch the entrepreneurship effort?
Yeah, we've never, I mean, different people do different things, and I've never launched a company with a CEO who's fresh from my lab, from a newly minted graduate student or postdoc, for many of the reasons that were mentioned earlier in this call, that it's a complex role, a complex position. Companies have lots of moving parts, and it'll take a while for somebody to learn. That said, I've had graduate students. My latest two companies are the CEOs are former graduate students from my lab who had industry experience for a while before becoming CEOs. So that was, kind of the best of both worlds, that I know them very, very well, respect them, and think they're wonderful people. And they had the terrific experience needed to take on the CEO role. So I suppose my recommendation would be that, if somebody came to me from my lab and said, I want to be a CEO, I would say, start the journey, start as a, scientist 2 or maybe director within a company, work your way up to VP, SVP, maybe you become CSO in that company, or bump up to CEO eventually, or, maybe there's that first company is a training opportunity and you find the terrific opportunity at the next company. But I think it serves people well to build up that knowledge and experience so that they really hit the ground running once they get that opportunity.
Yeah, that fleshes out what I was referring to earlier, and I think it is important. And there's that temptation. You think, if it's my baby, I know more about this than anybody else, as people finishing graduate school or a postdoc do. But that's not the same as having the experience to actually set up a company that has to do all these things infrastructurally that we've talked about earlier. And so watching somebody else who's good at it do it while maintaining your own investment and participation seems like the best compromise.
I agree.
And using internship programs. I think this is one of the things, people go to do an internship while they're in graduate school at some company or another, and there's a way of going where you just perform the role that they want you to perform. And there's another way of going saying, I will do what it is they want to do in the internship project, the technical stuff. But what I'm really going to do is to actually spy on how this works and try to actually generate a mentorship relationship with somebody, if not a CEO. If it's a big place, you're not going to get into the C-suite, but people who are farther up in the company who have company experience, and try to harvest that.
Yeah. The thing that we tell our founders is, and this is just empirically correct based on the data that we've seen, is that the number one risk of failure when bringing in someone into a startup is, do they have previous startup experience? So if they really want to be a startup person, it's most important just to understand what that means, because oftentimes if people are coming from industry or other areas, it's just a different thing when you have to, be at the bench and also proverbially take out, or maybe literally take out the trash. So that's just one thing for people to kind of like just think through. Sometimes
Actually, in the ecosystem, that remark about internships, the idea of purposefully doing an internship in a small place in order to get sight of what that actually looks like is probably a subset of a good idea.
Yeah. So and I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. Just wanted to conclude with maybe a statement from each of you, or thoughts on, if you had to look forward now 5 or 10 years, what do you think is gonna happen about, scientist founders, translation, either because of myriad things that are going on. Yeah, just curious your final thoughts.
In this environment, what kind of a question is that, David?
Put on the seatbelt and enjoy the roller coaster.
Yeah, I think that this country's economic strength, leadership, everything is built upon investment in STEM, especially post World War II. All you have to do is to take a look at the largest companies in the world by market cap, if you want to use that metric, and most of them are in the U.S. and they're in industries such as tech, especially tech, and biotech and pharmaceuticals. And that was because this country prioritized education and investment in R&D for a number of years, and that's borne incredible fruit and led to where we are these days. So I really hope we remember that looking ahead, and continue to prioritize investment in research. Thankfully, the U.S. does have good leadership in some areas. Like you brought up AI, for example. The U.S. is absolutely the clear leader in that field. But in order to maintain that and make America great again, we're going to have to continue that pattern of investing in R&D looking ahead. And because that's one of the biggest advantages that we've had over the past half century or century.
Well, yes, and convincing the we in this for the U.S. to continue to have the political will to have that commitment is something that, if you're on this call, you have some role in that. And part of it is probably proselytizing and helping people who don't already know that, like the people on this call, to actually understand it. Because we've got a huge understanding gap with the people who allocate part of their tax money to let us go out and do this kind of research in the academic sector, so that it ever gets to the point where it can drive a startup and eventually huge companies. So, I mean, we understand the cycle, but there's a problem with everybody else not understanding the cycle.
And I do think
go forth and proselytize.
Absolutely. And I do think universities have not done as good a job as we could in telling that story, in saying that the work that we're doing is going to benefit society. I think there's been a little bit of I'll specifically talk about Berkeley. 25 years ago, there was a sense of we do basic research, for the sake of knowledge. And now it's shifted to we do basic research because we want to benefit society. We want to create inventions and technologies that are going to make the world a better place. So we're telling that story better now, but we're a little bit late. I think that story could have started being told more articulately and more, vociferously 10, 15 years ago, and perhaps we wouldn't be in quite the place we are in right now. But I think universities are better positioned to make that to tell that story now, and we definitely need to start doing so more vocally.
Yeah, we've definitely seen an uptick in the interest in the translational path because I think people understand that not everything's guaranteed anymore, if you will, or so it is interesting from that perspective as well.
But I do definitely argue we still need to do the incredible basic research that we have been doing as a country. CRISPR and RNAi, or whatever technology you might imagine, started with basic, interesting observations in model systems. Repetitive DNA sequence in bacteria, or interesting findings on the color of flowers for a plant. That's how RNAi was discovered. So that basic research, in order to do translational research, you have to have something to translate. But we need to fill in the back end and tell the story about how those basic discoveries are leading to societal benefit more articulately.
Great. Well, I know it's 9:02, at least here on the West Coast, and in various time zones, it's 2 past the hour. So just want to say thank you, Barbara, Dave, for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking time to kind of explain this in more detail. Thanks everyone who was able to attend as well. We really appreciate it. And we do these on a regular basis. So look out for our next one, but hope everyone has a great rest of their Wednesday, and we'll just conclude there. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.